Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Tonight we're taking you across southeastern United States, where federal prosecutors are cracking down on a wide range of criminal activity, from dangerous pharmaceutical fraud schemes to violent robberies to international drug trafficking networks and crimes targeting some of the most vulnerable members of our community. This is Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report from March of 2026. We begin tonight in Miami. A massive pharmaceutical fraud case is sending two company executives to federal prison for decades after authorities say they flooded the U.S. drug supply with contaminated black market HIV medication. Patrick Boyd, age 47, and Charles Boyd, age 43, brothers and owners of wholesale pharmaceutical companies, have been sentenced to a combined 38 years in federal prison. Prosecutors say the scheme generated more than $92 million. According to court evidence, the brothers purchased HIV medication from black market suppliers who obtained those drugs from patients through illegal buyback schemes. Those medications were stripped of their prescription labels, repackaged under unsafe and unsanitary conditions, and pushed back unsealed and clearly previously used. The consequences were severe. Patients received incorrect medication, and in at least one case, a patient lost consciousness, and after ingesting contaminated drugs. The Department of Justice says this scheme preyed on vulnerable HIV patients after ingesting contaminated drugs. The Department of Justice says this scheme preyed on vulnerable HIV patients and undermined the integrity of the nation's drug supply. Now to Orlando, federal prosecutors have indicted a freight broker for defrauding the United States Postal Service out of $1 million. Kaim Faraj faced multiple counts of wire fraud and money laundering. According to the indictment, he secured hundreds of UPS transportation contracts through the agency freight auction program. But instead of delivering the mail, prosecutors say he failed to transport the shipments and then entered false delivery confirmations into the system to get paid. Authorities say he then funneled the money through the shell company before investing proceeds into personal brokerage account. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison per count. In Jackson, Mississippi, a failed robbery attempt has resulted in a lengthy federal sentence. Taurease Stewart, age 31, has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted robbery with a firearm. According to court records, Stewart entered a dollar store in May of 2022, banished a handgun, and demanded money from the clerk. When the cash register malfunctioned, he fled on foot. Police responded quickly, pursued Stewart through a nearby neighborhood, and arrested him after a foot chase. The case was prosecuted under the Hobbs Act, which covers robberies affecting interstate commerce. In Montgomery, Alabama, two defendants have now been sentenced in a multi-year fraud scheme involving stolen mail and alternate checks. Tavon Rogers and Joseph Shepard have been sentenced to both 24 months in federal prison. Both will serve 3 years of supervised release. According to court documents, the scheme ran from 2022 through early of 2025. The group stole mail, altered checks, and deposited fraudulent funds into accounts under their control. Losses exceeded $200,000, and court ordered significant forfeit payments. A fourth defendant is scheduled for sentencing next month. In Norcross, Georgia, federal agents have seized large quantities of deadly narcotics. Authorities recovered 30 pounds of fentanyl, 10 pounds of methamphetamine, and multiple loaded firearms. Two men, Benjamin Lozzi and Oruto Corano Riveras, now faces federal drug trafficking charges. Agents say they observed active drug transactions before making arrests and executing search warrants. Loisy, a convicted felon, was found carrying a stolen handgun and several pounds of methamphetamine. Corano Rivero, identified as a Mexican national without legal status, was found with fentanyl in his vehicle and additional quantities at his residence. In a separate Georgia case, federal prosecutors have indicted a repeat offender accused of targeting professional athletes. Kwani Ford is charged with multiple counts including wire fraud, identity theft, and sex trafficking. Authorities say Ford used phishing scheme to steal login credentials from NBA and NFL players. He allegedly posed as an adult film actress and a customer service representative to trick victims into providing access to their accounts. After gaining control, he allegedly stole financial information and spent thousands of dollars. Prosecutors also say Ford coerced a woman into engaging in commercial sex act and secretly recording encounter without consent. He has pled not guilty and remains in custody. In South Carolina, federal court has issued multiple sentences in cases tied to pandemic fraud and deadly narcotics. Jonathan Stumer, 54, was sentenced to 80 months in prison for defrauding federal COVID relief programs of more than $1.8 million. Prosecutors say he used fake business and falsified documents to obtain funds meant for struggling companies. He has been ordered to repay more than $1.8 million in restitution. In a separate case, Desmond Tucker has been sentenced to more than 10 years in prison for distributing fentanyl. Investigators link Tucker to the overdose death of a 20-year-old woman. In North Carolina, a sheriff deputy and his family have pled guilty into coordinating fraud schemes. Ricky McMillan, along with his wife and 2 sons, admitted to stealing more than $542,000 throughout fraudulent COVID loan applications. Authorities say they submitted false tax records, inflated employee numbers, and diverted funds into personal accounts. All 4 now face up to 30 years in federal prison. In Knoxville, Tennessee, a federal jury has convicted 3 women in healthcare fraud case. Prosecutors say they altered prescriptions without authorization and billed Medicare for medication that were never legitimately prescribed. Witnesses testified that doctors' identities were used without permission, and insurance would not have paid had they known the truth. In Virginia, federal authorities are pursuing charges connected to a deadly university shooting. Kanya Champman is accused of illegally selling a firearm used in the March 12th shooting at Old Dominion University. The attack left 1 person dead and 2 others injured. Authorities say the alleged shooter was a convicted felon who could not legally possess a firearm. In a separate case, an alleged international drug trafficking has appeared in federal court. Sebastian Marset is accused of leading global cocaine trafficking network and laundering millions of dollars throughout the U.S. banking system. In West Virginia, federal prosecutors are targeting drug activity near schools. Joseph Alugi has pled guilty to selling fentanyl within 1,000 feet of 2 schools. He faces up to 40 years in prison. In a separate case, 2 Maryland residents have been admitted to drug trafficking in the region. Both faces up to 20 years in federal prison. In Maryland, federal prosecutors have filed charges in cases involving child exploitation and cyberstalking. Sean Livingston has been indicted on multiple counts, including coercion of a minor and recipient of child sexual abuse material. Authorities say he used social media platforms and payment applications to exploit victims across the country. In a separate case, a Navy lieutenant commander has been sentenced to 41 months in prison for cyberstalking. Prosecutors say he harassed his ex-wife and her partner for years using false reports and repeated online harassment. From pharmaceutical frauds to violent crimes to international drug trafficking and cyber exploitation, these cases represent the ongoing efforts of federal authorities to combat crimes across the southern East United States. For Englebrook Independent News, I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Stay informed, stay vigilant. Good night.